Good evening and welcome. Tonight we will be going over the history and geography of Bethlehem in the Palestinian territories of the West Bank. West Bank. Now, of course, I need to make a little disclaimer before we get started, mainly in that in my comment section, I do not tolerate anger or hatred toward any group of people, any country, any religion, any of that. So please refrain from those kinds of comments. If you leave it, I'm just going to delete it. I'm not going to leave that up on my channel. We are going to make this video as factual as possible with no opinions. It's just straight historical facts, right? And yes, the title says it is in Palestine because it is literally a governorate within the West Bank, you can see here. If we were doing like Tel Aviv, I would put Israel in the title. If we're doing Gaza, I'd put Palestine in the title. That's just because that's where it is. And putting the states of Palestine, so on and so forth, it's too long of a title. I just put Palestine. So that is why I did that. So yeah, I'm not Jewish, I'm not Muslim, and I'm not Christian. I do not have a horse in this race. I am not siding with either side. I'm not leaning toward one or the other, okay? This is just factual geography and history, okay? This is a place of relaxation. So let's relax and learn about one of the most fascinating corners of the world, right? The Bethlehem Governorate, located here in the West Bank, is just south of Jerusalem here. It is very hilly, like this half very hilly, very green, and this half very barren, and that is mainly due to the Dead Sea, which is one of the saltiest bodies of water on the planet. The salt, which we'll look at on Google Earth, just seeps into the landscape here and makes it very dry and very barren. Not a lot of habitation around there. It's very rocky. Not a lot of plants can grow there. So it's not nearly as inhabited as this half. There are 2 UNESCO sites in this area. Let's pull those up. On my tablet here, I'm going to pull up this first one that talks more about this hilly green area over here. It says Palestine, land of olives and vines, cultural landscape of southern Jerusalem and Batir. This site is located a few kilometers southwest of Jerusalem in the central highlands between Nablus and Hebron. The Batir Hill landscape comprises a series of farmed valleys known as Widyan, with characteristic stone terraces, some of which are irrigated for market garden protection, while others are dry and planted with grapevines and olive trees. The development of terrace farming in such a mountainous region is supported by a network of irrigation channels fed by underground sources. A traditional system of distribution is then used to share the water collected through this network between families from the nearby village of Batir. Let's see some of the photos here, which you can see some terraces here, but and some irrigation pools there. But the pictures are a lot better on Google Earth. We'll take a look at those later. You can see some terraces here. Really, really neat. Don't really associate terraced farming with this corner of the world, do you? At least I don't. So that's pretty neat. Oh, here's a good picture. You can kind of see them up against the hill there. But yeah, the pictures on Google Earth are a lot better. We'll look at those last. And then, of course, we have the birthplace of Jesus, Church of the Nativity, and the pilgrimage route in Bethlehem. The inscribed property is situated 10 kilometers south of Jerusalem on the site identified by Christian tradition as the birthplace of Jesus since the 2nd century. A church was first completed there in the year 339, and the edifice that replaced it after a fire in the 6th century retains elaborate floor mosaics from the original building. The site also includes Latin, Greek Orthodox, Franciscan, and Armenian convents and churches, as well as bell towers, terraced gardens, and a pilgrimage route. So again, we'll take a look at this on Google Earth. But this actually has some pictures that aren't on Google Earth that I want to show you. This really cool, very old church. This is the oldest continuously used worship spot in Christianity, which is pretty neat, isn't it? So over here is this little corner, which is believed to be, I wish I could make it, there we go. Inside here is where the cave was that Jesus was born in. And then they made this little hole in the exact spot where they believe Jesus was born. So you kind of have to crouch down and look inside of it. So, yeah, we'll talk more about that in history, about where Jesus was actually born in Bethlehem, that we believe. But let's get into the history of this area, because it's very long and complex. I'm trying to condense it down. There's my notes over there. I need my notes for this one. It's pretty long. So, Bethlehem has been inhabited. This region's been inhabited for forever. It's technically part of the Fertile Crescent of Mesopotamia, all the way into Egypt, right? So the name Bethlehem comes from the Canaanites, who worshipped a fertility god named Lamu. And on a hill in Bethlehem, they built a shrine worship site, and it was the home of Lamu, or Beit Lamu, Beth, and we get Beit Lahim, like the Arabic name, and that becomes Bethlehem. Isn't that interesting? It comes from a very ancient god. Of course, we get into the ancient Hebrew history. This was part of ancient Judea. Bethlehem in particular was very important to the history here, was the burial site of Rachel, or Rachel, very important figure in the Bible, and also the birthplace of King David. Very important, of course, in the Bible and in Jewish history. In the year 40 BCE, King Herod came conquering. He fought a victorious battle against the Jewish population around here or so. And on that site, he built Herodium, which was like a castle, fortress, town. It's in ruins now because it was destroyed by the Romans in the year 71 CE, because it had been converted into a synagogue. So I'm jumping ahead. We'll talk about why that was later. If you know your history, you know why the Romans destroyed it, but we're almost there. And then, of course, we have the birthplace of Jesus Christ, essentially the founder of Christianity. At least his teachings are the foundations of Christianity, right? So I mentioned before the cave in which he was born, because of course the story is that he was born like in a barn, right? Because there was no room for Mary and Joseph to stay the night, except in like the animal barn. That's where she gave birth, right? So the thought about where exactly this was, and this dates back to like the 100s, the 200s, right? Was that it wasn't necessarily a barn. It was originally listed as the place where the animals were kept, And in those days, the animals were kept in caves. So it's most likely Jesus was born in a cave. And that cave was a very sacred spot for a long time until they built the big church on top of it. But before we get into the church, we have to talk about the Bar Kokhba revolt, which was when the Romans began occupying what's now Israel, Palestine, the whole Levant area here, right? The large Jewish population rose up in revolt. The Romans reacted by attacking very fiercely. This was when the Second Temple in Jerusalem was destroyed. And also that town that was mentioned in UNESCO, Batir, which is about right like here, was completely razed. So there's lots of archaeological evidence from that ancient town there today. But yeah, they destroyed everything. This was during the reign of Emperor Hadrian. And then yeah, they destroyed the Herodium, which we'll look at on Google Earth later. So the Church of the Nativity wasn't built until around the year 330 during the Byzantine era, right? During the reign of Emperor Constantine. I think it was his mom. His mom became Christian and she became like a collector. She got hyper focused on Christian artifacts and Christian like exact places. So she traveled to see the cave, and was like, well, we got to build a church here. So they built a church there. It was burnt down, like it said in UNESCO, during the 5th century. It was actually burned down in a revolt in the year 529 by the Samaritans. They were revolting against the Byzantines, and they didn't just burn down the church, they burned down the entire city of Bethlehem. All these sources I read about the destruction of the first church made it sound like, oh, it was a fire. It made it sound like an accident. No, it was very much on purpose. Of course, it was rebuilt not long after that. And that's the church that we have today. In the year 614, the Sassanid Persians invaded, and that opened the door in the year 637 for Muslim armies to invade and control the area. It was ruled by the Umayyad dynasty and the Abbasid dynasty until the year 1099 when the Crusaders came and took over the area, booted all the Muslims out and made it a Christian city. Started their own kingdom of Jerusalem there. It was retaken in the year 1187 by Saladin, and it went back and forth a couple of times between crusading Europeans and various Muslim powers. And there was kind of a consensus at this point that whenever the Muslims would take over, that they recognized that this site was extremely, extremely important to Christianity. So it would kind of come and go, but for the most part, it was very accepting of Christian pilgrims who wanted to come here, especially during Christmas time, during the holidays. Sometimes not, but most of the time they were. By 1517, this area was under the control of the Ottoman Empire. And it did not exactly flourish. It was mainly just, like I said, a pilgrimage site for Christians, various Christians around the world. Because, there were the Greeks, there were the Armenians, so on and so forth. And that would not change until the year 1920. After World War I, the Ottoman Empire completely collapsed. All of its areas were divided up, mainly between Britain and France, in various mandates, they called them. The League of Nations mandated Britain and France to control parts of the Ottoman Empire until they could get on their feet. So, the mandatory Palestine was controlled by Britain, and they agreed with many other League of Nation powers at the time that it would be pretty neat if there is a Jewish state established here. And that very much went back and forth, taking a pause during World War II. But then the sentiment very much increased after World War II, after many Jewish people were extremely discriminated against. In a word that I can't really say on my channel without it getting flagged, starts with an H. We all know what it was. But the sentiment of creating a Jewish state here became more and more popular until 1948, when the state of Israel was declared. In doing so, it triggered the Arab-Israeli War. Jordan, you can see over here, crossed over the Jordan River and invaded this area here, which is today known as the West Bank. And Jordan became Transjordan because it was on both sides of the Jordan River. So it was controlled by Jordan until the Six-Day War of 1967, when Israel took over the West Bank and many other parts of the world here. And they've held control of the West Bank ever since. Occupied it, I suppose you could say. There have been 2 major protest movements in Bethlehem Governorate against the Israeli occupation, known as the Intifada. The first one being in 1989, I believe. The second was throughout the early 2000s. And it was protests that were met by the Israelis with extreme violence. Extreme violence would be returned, so on and so forth. After the second Intifada, Israel would react by building a very long wall separating their part of Jerusalem from their part of the Muslim part of the West Bank here in Bethlehem. And we'll look at that on Google Earth. So this area is, on paper, technically controlled by the Palestinians. From what I read, it's very left-leaning Palestinians for the most part. Palestinians that want peace through nonviolence, through negotiation. Which, in my opinion, I said I would say opinions. In my opinion, that's the way to go, right? But there are many refugees living in and around Bethlehem from 1948, from when they were kicked out of their homes in Jerusalem. We'll take a look at one of those refugee camps that people have been living there for generations now. And at the time when they were booted out, they thought that they would be coming back in like a couple weeks, maybe even a couple days, so they locked their homes, put their keys in their pockets, and left. So a lot of families passed down those keys to their children and then their children. So keys are a very important symbol to Palestinians here. Every Palestinian family still has their key to their old home. Even if that home doesn't exist anymore, they still have it as a symbol of someday they'll return. And that is the history of Bethlehem Governorate. I think we should just go straight to the tablet because I have a lot of interesting things to show you. So let's go hop over there. So here we are in Bethlehem Governorate. As much as I type it in, it won't show the borders of the actual governorate. So I just have Bethlehem highlighted. But let's start by zooming out so you can see exactly where we are in the world. So here we are in the Levant, which is essentially like this coastline here, the Levant, along the Mediterranean. You can see Egypt over here, Sinai Peninsula, or Cyprus. So the Levant is essentially the coast of Syria, Lebanon, and Israel, and Palestine here in the Gaza Strip. And I guess you could count the Sinai too, I suppose. But we are in the West Bank. can see Jerusalem right up here, and Bethlehem is just to the south of it. I want to show you this slideshow, which is really pretty. I was watching Rick Steves' report on Bethlehem from like 10 years ago, and he said the skyline, if I remember what he said, it was nice. He said the skyline's a cacophony of crosses and crescents. I liked that. Very beautiful old city, right? With the old and the new alongside everything. Very old churches from every branch of Christianity. Mosques alongside them. You can see the minarets there. And of course, Bethlehem goes all out for Christmas. Not recently because of the conflict in Gaza, but during more peaceful times, Bethlehem will deck itself out in all kinds of lights, stars, angels. They'll have a big Christmas parade, all for the tourists, of course, but you know, it's still very beautiful and very festive, right? But yeah, in times of extreme conflict like now, they will not decorate, which makes a lot of sense, right? They'll still do services and things, of course, but not fully decorate. So I think we need to start at the Church of the Nativity, which, let's look at it from above. As you can see, it's shaped like a cross there, like pretty much all major churches and cathedrals are. So yeah, this was the spot. The oldest continuously used worship site in Christianity. There's a crusader there. And decked out for, I believe, for like every branch of Christianity. Because all the major branches have their own way of doing things in various ways. You can see this is the original floor from the first church. Really pretty. Byzantine style mosaics. So in here is the little corner where you can walk in and see the spot where it's most likely believed that Jesus was born. Up here, let's go to the north where you can see Rachel's tomb. We'll start by looking at the actual tomb, and then we'll look around this area because it's very interesting. So here's her tomb, and from what I can tell in this slideshow, it looks like that this site has been made into a synagogue. You can see a reading room here, maybe a study room. You can see, let me see, pretty tree there. The Torah there, all rolled up, of course, and protected in the sanctuary. You can see the walls there, which we'll take a look at. So yeah, it looks like it's being used as, there's the bathroom. Some very old Hebrew script there. Looks like they've whitewashed around it to keep the walls nice but still preserve this old text. That's pretty neat. The parking lot. All aspects pretty chandelier too. But yes, you can see here that the wall that I mentioned, goes around here and then dips down this road, goes around the tomb and then back up. There's the parking lot there. So you can come visit from this way, park your car, and then travel here without dealing with any Palestinians, let's put it that way. Over here you can see one of the refugee camps that I mentioned. So the wall is extra secure along here to try to keep out any Palestinians. Just like no other way of saying that, it's to keep out the Palestinians. So yes, people have been living in this camp since 1948. Children have been born, grown, married, had their own children, and died in that time, right? Pretty remarkable. You can see the shop behind the wall. Over here is the walled-off hotel, which, there's the, let me show you. If the name would pop back up, please. There we Come on. Boom. There we go. The Waldorf Hotel, which I believe is a pun on Waldorf Hotel, I think. But it was designed, and I think it's partly owned by Banksy, the street artist. So there's lots of very artsy stuff in here. A museum, very artsy rooms. This one's really ominous. And then this one's really beautiful. I love that color. Oh, this one's really pretty, all the jewel tones. And yeah, very artsy fartsy hotel. The Waldorf Hotel. Interesting stuff. There's the exterior that I want to show you. It's really beautiful, isn't it? Because it's hotel, but it's also an art piece. There's the wall. Of course, all graffitied over, notices posted on it. Yes, very, very artsy place. There are lots of other interesting sites to see around Bethlehem. There's some neat museums. The Palestinian Heritage Center is pretty neat. Lots of neat pictures of Palestinian culture. Some interesting street art as well. But yeah, there's lots of interesting things to see around here. I always encourage you, when you have time, to hop over and check out these places that I go to, because I only show you like the most interesting ones. There's always cool places to see. It's a very large urban area, as you can see. This is interesting. Solomon's pools. I was like, oh, what's the history there? They're just reservoirs from back in the day that look like they're still being used. So yeah, lots of old mixed with the new in places like this. Let's find Batir up here, because they actually flagged the UNESCO site. Here it is. So we can see the terraces a little better. The old walls here. Again, alongside the new, huh? Some irrigation. There's that pool that we saw before. Old walkways. And jumping in. Maybe on hot days. Come on. I thought there were better pictures. Here you can see some of the terraces going up the hillsides. Yeah, because from above, you can see them here, but you can't really get the full scope in the 3D of these terraces, right? You can imagine. I think if I tap on just Batir, maybe that's where I saw the good pictures. Oh yeah, see here. Very, very old terraces. Wow, pretty from above. Here we go. Terraced farming in the Middle East. Who would have thought? Pretty clever way to grow vines and olives, right? Let's see. Making sure, yeah, I'm not. Let me zoom out. There we go. I was like, I know something's not right. There we go. Make sure I don't get lost. We'll take a look at Herodium, which you can see is on this hill here. Go like that. Boom, we can see the hillside. And you can see lots of the ruins from this used to be, like I said, like a fortress slash town. They've recreated parts of it there. It looks like sand art, to be honest. So you can see what it used to look like, miniature version, but yeah, there's still lots of bits of it left behind in ruins, where King Herod once reigned with an iron fist. Look at that. We can also look at, I guess we'll just hop over to the Dead Sea. I love the Dead Sea. I'd love to visit someday. I'm already a person that's very buoyant. I have a hard time diving down. I always just start floating back up. So I've always wanted to go in the Dead Sea and see just how well I float. But if we go in here, you can see the salted earth here, right? Very, very barren, very dry. Just nothing can really grow here at all. It's all salty. You can see there's some Israeli communities popping up like they tend to do. This one's actually kind of interesting because they've built a little like pool, little sports areas, and they've planted lots of date trees here. The bomb shelter's temporarily closed, you guys. But it looks like they're building out more, as these communities tend to do. But I mean, look at this cliff here. Didn't notice this before. Let me see. Wow, it's a big cliff. Yeah, it's not like this is a thriving Palestinian community to begin with, right? It's all very barren. It is not a good place to settle. You'd have to terraform, right? Like they're doing in those Jewish communities. Oh, that's a brave person. I could never. That's too scary. Big rockies. What? Okay, this leg is up for whatever reason. Yeah, it wouldn't be me. But there's an interesting spot over here, Mineral Beach, which looks like it's an abandoned beachy area from times long past. You can see this is all salt caked onto these rocks here. Old umbrellas there. Abandoned due to earthen sinkholes, it says. And there's some friends trying to eke out a living here. I guess they could lick up the salt. Probably tastes good. What does the caption say? Yeah, abandoned due to earthen sinkholes. And you can really see all the salt collected there. All these salty patches all built up along the shore. Wow. Yeah, what was once probably a fun little beachy area, now long abandoned. Kind of haunting. Ooh. They probably don't want you coming here. It's probably too dangerous. I wouldn't mind seeing it though. I think that's pretty cool. Like I said, I've always wanted to go to the Dead Sea. Given certain times, I'd probably have to visit the Jordanian side, but we'll see, I suppose. You can see the treaty line marked there. And let's see, is there anywhere else I wanted to show you? There's all kinds of slideshows in here, but I have to be careful that I don't wind up in, see, like, it's very small. There's the border with Israel there, and then the next governorate is not too far off. So let's find one more slideshow and oh my goodness. Excuse you. There we go. Let's find one more slideshow. Let's look at the Natural History Museum here while we close this out. Wow. So thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this style of content, please consider subscribing. Oh my goodness, little hyenas there. This is an ongoing series on my channel, and we're going to every region of the world in alphabetical order. Next, we're going to hop on down to Madagascar, which is interesting because you guys really like Madagascar videos. Unfortunately, this corner of Madagascar doesn't have like, oh, look at the old shofar. Or just maybe just ram's horns, I'm not sure. This corner of Madagascar doesn't really have any pictures on Google Earth. So we're going to do another surprise tingly sound for you, which I have it right next to me. I'll just let you hear a little bit of the crinkles. So yeah, you don't want to miss out. I do hope that you found this video to be relaxing and educational. And I hope that you have a good night. Good night.